This year, there's been a question that's been on my mind constantly. And it's just been reignited again with The Last of Us Part 2 being a hot topic. And that question is, why do we care about critic scores so much? Like, whether it's games, movies, TV shows, even music, we always want to know, what do the critics think? And I'm just wondering, like, how did we get to this point where it's so important that one critic's opinion can be placed over the opinion of 1,000 quote-unquote regular people? Now, some people act like they don't care about critic scores, and admittedly, I was one of those people who's just like, I don't care what the critics think, fuck the critics, right? They gave my favorite game of all time a 6.8, so like, but the fact that I'm saying fuck the critics because they had an opinion I disagree with means that I do care. And frankly, most of us still care. Like, we need to stop pretending that we don't care about critic scores, because when they give a high score to something that we like, we go parading that score around like it's confirmed good now. Like, we knew it was good, but the critics said it's a 10 out of 10, so it's actually good now. But then when they give a game that you like a low score, like a 6 or a 5 or even a 3 out of 10 on a game that everyone else thinks is at least an 8, then you go, well, fuck the critics, their opinions don't mean shit. Like, there's clearly a hypocrisy there. So we have to come to the conclusion that deep down, we still care about critics and we want them to validate our opinions. And that is a tough pill to swallow, because why should we care, right? Honestly, I wish we didn't, because 95% of them are literally just giving regular people opinions and have just been put on a pedestal that they don't deserve to be awarded. And if you ask me, I think they should just join the user aggregate score like the rest of us. Yeah, that's right. In 2020, I don't believe that there should be a separate section for critic scores and then a separate section for user scores when there's like thousands of users and like 50 critics reviewing something. Because the truth is, most of these critics don't know what they're doing any more than the regular users giving review scores. Like, how can you review a game and call it a masterpiece and then say that the game is almost never fun? Like, who comes up with this shit? If we were going to be keeping the idea of critics, then I feel like they should be held to a much higher standard than the standard they are now, which is just simply be good at writing. I believe you have to be well versed in the media that you're critiquing. Like, you should be a gamer if you're reviewing games, not just someone who doesn't know how to play the average game and just blames the game for everything that isn't the game's fault. But they do it in such an eloquent way that it's just taken as fact. I mean, you look at all these companies like IGN, GameSpot. IGN is a powerhouse. I'm turning 25 this year. I've known about IGN since I was a kid. We're talking early 2000s. They've been around since the 90s. They are so big that whenever a game comes out, we all care about what IGN have to say. In the 2000s, I felt like the only two critics that even mattered at that point were IGN and GameSpot. Nowadays, everyone's a critic, right? You know, Metacritic is like aggregating critic scores, even though they weigh different critic scores differently. So if you have critic scores and Metacritic, right, and IGN is there, their opinion is weighed higher than other random critic website because IGN has more clout. But when you break it down, IGN just hire employees to do the critic scores. They get regular people who join the company to do a score. So why is it that someone with a blog can be a critic, but their score is weighed less than someone who works at IGN who's still a regular person who just has an opinion on the game as well? You see the problem with the weighting of critic scores, or the weighting of scores in general, because at that point, even the lowest critic has got a higher ranked opinion than the average user, right? And that's the thing. Once you've made a name for yourself, you're expected to cover everything. They want IGN to review games, they want IGN to review movies, TV shows, it doesn't matter. So we'll employ people to do all these different things. They're just regular people, but their opinions are all weighed higher. How many of them are actually well versed in the things that they're covering? And this is primarily why it's such a dated system. You're not even buying into an individual critic who's made a name for himself by being consistent. You're buying into a company, a corporation, to the point where you could make a game and have that game get one score and then they remaster that game, or simply even port the game and add new features, and that port gets a lower score than the original game because they got a different person to review it, but it's under the umbrella of the same company. I can imagine how confusing that would be to a reader who's supposed to see this company as a unified front. And again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't follow the opinions of a critic. If you like that critic and you agree with a lot of the things they say, then you're going to trust their opinion on whatever it is, whether it's a game or a movie or a TV show. That's fine. If it's a person, I as a person have strong opinions on video games that I like versus dislike. There's things I like in games, there's things I dislike. And if you agree with a lot of the things I say, then you're going to value my opinion on a game that you haven't played more than you'd value someone else's opinion. And that's fine. There are just some people who are literally better at critiquing movies than others. Like a lot of people, myself included, because I'm definitely a casual when it comes to movies. But there's a lot of people who just go, yeah, it was funny, I liked it, I'll give it a 7 out of 10. And movie critics will go into another level of detail that only people who truly appreciate cinema on that level will understand. And they have the database to back it up because they watch so many movies that they notice all these patterns of things that the average person doesn't know. And even if the average person does mirror the feelings of said critic, they may not be able to articulate it as well as the critic who has the experience. But with a company, you're not even buying into that consistency. It's just a name. They are just IGN. IGN could hire me tomorrow to review something and my opinion would contradict with what they've said on other games that were similar. And it's things like this that convince me that the idea of having critics weighed above user scores is a dated system. Now let's take it back to the 1990s and even the 1980s, in an era where the internet had not taken over or even existed. And let's say a video game comes out or a movie is released and you want to know if it's worth watching. We needed critics to tell us what was what, because where the fuck else could we find out if this game or if this movie was worth spending our money on? If you didn't have a friend who had played that game or bought that game or watched that movie, they were in the same boat as you. You had no idea. It's 1990, Home Alone has come out. Why am I watching this movie? If the critics aren't there to tell me it's good, I'm not going to see it. If a friend hasn't seen it and gone, trust me, you'll love this, I'm not going to see it. I mean, unless the trailers were enough and you were like sold on that already, which is fine. Just putting that out there, because there's certain things that you're going to be more motivated to see regardless, and there's other things that you're not sure and you might want the validation of a critic. But I digress. We needed these authorities because we didn't have collective opinion. There was no internet to unite us. So the critics had purpose. They were the ones who got things early. They were the ones who went, okay, we know you're on a budget. We know you want to know if this thing is worth spending your hard-earned money on. This game is $60 or this movie ticket is $20 or whatever. I don't know how much they were spending back in 1999. Obviously inflation is a thing, but we don't want you to waste your money, so we're gonna tell you. And if you value our opinion, which of course you would at this point, then you listen to us. Or if you're still curious, you can go and see it yourself, but we warned you if we said it wasn't good. They had a very strong purpose. But nowadays, the critic formula is more dated than Blockbuster. Like, people around the world can share their opinions on everything, and yet some rando with a job working for a website suddenly still has opinions that are considered more important. I don't even know how this hasn't died out sooner. But that's the thing about culture, is that some things just keep staying around. Even though we don't actually need critics anymore in the sense of corporations, they still exist because they built names for themselves. A lot of us who grew up before the internet took over, and I mean, I was born in 95 and I still feel like I had a bit of years before the internet completely took over. But a lot of us who grew up in that era are still set in our ways. We still grew up at a time where critics mattered, and it's still ingrained in our head that we have to care what they think. On top of that, multiple websites perpetuate this, like Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes, who all value critic scores as separate from user scores. So because these websites are saying these are the more important scores, we also take that as fact, because why not? If they're putting 20 critic scores as one category and then 5,000 user scores as another category, why wouldn't we feel like the critics are more important? That's what we've been trained to believe. And by pedestalizing the critics still, it causes new people to do the same thing, which keeps the cycle going because it creates a demand for more critics. So it's essentially a cycle that needs to be broken. Until websites stop highlighting 30 critic scores over 300,000 user scores, the cycle will continue. You're allowed to value the opinion of someone on the internet if they're a YouTuber or even a critic that you like individually, but I still don't believe that person should have a weighted score on any form of system. There's still one person, there's still one individual, there's still one user. And to play devil's advocate, some people are obviously gonna go, well, critics know what they're talking about. Some users, they say random shit and, you know, people review bomb, and they use The Last of Us Part 2 as an example. And going through these reviews and looking at what people are saying, I don't even believe all of these are review bombs. Like, yes, a lot of them probably are, and of course they should have a system in place that is able to detect review bombing on a higher scale. Like, they shouldn't be allowed to use bots, obviously. If you can't write out a well thought out review, then maybe you shouldn't be given a score on Metacritic. But at the same time, a lot of games come out and not every game gets review bombed. Not every game gets a 3 point something out of 10. You can't just dismiss every single review as, oh, they're just angry because there's a gay sex scene. I've heard that used as an excuse. It's like, that's the reason why they're giving it low scores. scores, like dismiss everything, the game's a masterpiece. That's not really fair, is it? At some point, we're gonna have to accept that clearly amongst the users, not everyone is loving this game. I saw some well-constructed reviews in that Metacritic from regular users like you and me. Like, yeah, there's reviewers who are praising it, and then there's also reviewers saying that they denied early access to the game because they didn't want to say it was bad and get blacklisted. There's a lot of debate going on. Someone else even said that they used to work for IGN and that they never get paid for reviews, because obviously that's been a debate amongst people, like, was this review bought? Because there's a lot of times where critic scores are just completely different from user scores, whether it's the critics rating the game very highly and the users saying no, and then critics rating a score low and then the users going, actually no, this is great. It's bound to happen. But at the end of the day, if the people giving reviews are getting early copies of games, there's always going to be a debate as to whether some of them are getting bought or not, and there's always going to be smoke and mirrors there, and we're just going to have to accept that as long as critics exist. Hell, I'm not even a critic, but if you gave me a free copy of a game, I'm going to like that game a little bit more, simply because I'm not judging it with the pain of spending $60. Like, I'm going, well, for a free game, it's kind of fun, and it's very hard to remove that bias. It's easier to see the positives in something that you paid less for or paid nothing for, as opposed to something that you felt your hard-earned money being spent on. But I don't want to go in circles. When it comes to The Last of Us Part 2, I've seen the entire spectrum. I've seen reviewers and fans who have praised it. I've seen reviewers and fans who have disliked it. I've seen people say everything but the gameplay is amazing, and I've seen other people say the gameplay is great, but the story was butchered from the first one. And I've seen everything in between. Everything is all over the place. And that's exactly my point. The critics and the fans are in the same boat, and they should be weighed as such. You can value one person's opinion over another person's opinion, but that's your own personal valuing. The websites should not do that. Every opinion should be considered weighed equally, as long as you have a reasoning behind your score and not just bots that are allowed to just spam the same score over and over again as a way to change the narrative of a game, because people spam 0 out of 10s, people spam 10 out of 10s. But as long as systems are put in place to prevent things like that, like maybe forcing you to actually write a review and, cross-checking it, they got ways of checking to make sure you don't just copy someone else's text. Or maybe even a verification system like some websites use, where you have to verify that you've purchased something before you're allowed to have a review on it. Then there should be no reason why critics should be weighed higher. And the moment we as the people remove that pedestal from the critics is the moment we can move forward as a community. Do I see this happening anytime soon? Probably not. If I don't say anything, then there's no chance of it happening, because something needs to be put into motion. In an ideal world, I believe there'll be no corporations of critics. If you're an individual and you have an opinion, make a website, have an opinion, that's fine. Have a YouTube channel, share your opinions. If people want to value that, that's okay. But I do not believe in a corporation that is allowed to have multiple different employees coming and going, giving contradicting opinions, but all coming under the same name and umbrella. I do not believe in the opinions of critics being officially weighed higher than regular users. And maybe at some point the world will catch up to this. But until then, we just keep waiting. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell. Let me know what you guys think about this topic. Let me know if you want to see more discussion type content like this. 3K subs, we out here. But it's your boy, PREMulous, Rem Gang, and I'm out.